In this video, I take a deeper dive into the software that runs all Pimax headsets, Pimax Play, running through each setting to explain how these magical sliders can improve your VR experience, and all from an older gamer's perspective. If you've been following my channel, you have seen that I've been spending a lot of time using the Pimax Crystal Light for my sim racing and sim flying, mostly flying in space at the moment. And it has to be said that the image clarity and depth of the blacks on this headset really impresses me. A lot of that clarity is shaped by how you set things up in Pimax Play, the companion software that manages drivers, applies firmware updates, and lets you fine-tune the headset to the performance limits of your PC. Of course, other factors like Steam VR, OpenXR Toolkit, and of course the in-game graphical settings also play their part, but Pimax Play is where it all begins for the Pimax VR user. And if you are coming from the meta universe, you will be pleased to know that all of the settings you need are in this one app, in the one place, and not buried away in a separate app in a debug folder. Yes, Oculus Debug Tool, I am looking at you. That being said, in comparison to the meta software, the Pimax Play app is neither the prettiest nor the easiest app to learn or appreciate, and it can be a little overwhelming at first glance. In fact, you can't even look at the settings for your headset unless the headset is connected and turned on. Otherwise, everything in here is blank like this. So if you want to follow along with this video, make sure your headset is connected and switched on, and then click Device down here in the left, if this area here is not already displayed. Once it is, click on the Device Settings button just here to bring up all the settings you have access to when using a Pimax Play headset. And finally, grab a beverage of choice, kick back and relax as I take you through Pimax Play section by section and give you my take on what these settings actually do and how they affect us as PC VR gamers.
That only works on PCs.
The Device tab. Just to repeat here, to access the device settings, you need to be on this screen and click this button. You might be wondering where that is. You're clicking on various different things and even the settings and you can't find it. No, you need to click here where it names your headset and then click here. And then the device settings will appear. And the device tab is the first screen you'll see when opening the headset settings in Pimax Play. Right at the top, it shows your current firmware version and also whether or not an update is available for the headset or the controllers. That will be displayed here. If it is, you just click here. It will check for updates, and if there are none, it will tell you. And if there are some, it'll tell you that as well. Below that is the serial number for your specific headset. That's here. Okay. If you have a support problem, you can click copy here and then put that in your email or your support docket or whatever. Below this, we'll move on to tracking settings just here. And we've got room lighting frequency. This has nothing to do with the refresh rate of your headset. It's purely for the inside out tracking cameras. It tells them what frequency your lighting is running at. In Europe, that's usually 50 Hertz. That's why I have that over here at 50 Hertz. And in the US, I believe it's 60 Hertz. Get it wrong, and you may notice tracking drift or jitter inside the headset. There's an auto option here that's supposed to automatically work it out, but I always set mine manually because I'm that kind of control geek. We move down a bit further and we have here recline mode. This one is designed for when you want to lie back and watch a movie or other kinds of visual entertainment. I won't judge, it's your headset, it's your rules. However, switching it on disables the track movement, but you're not going to need that when you're just along for the ride, so as to say. Then we actually move on to the headset refresh rate. I have it here set to 90 Hertz, but there is also 120 Hertz and 72 Hertz here. Higher refresh rates will feel smoother, 120 and 90, but they will demand more power from your PC. I have a 4070 Super, so 90 Hz is perfectly viable for me in most sims. On more modest setups with a less powerful graphics card or sims that have performance issues, 72Hz often strikes the best balance for FPS. If you have a 1590 and a 9800X3D, dial in 120Hz and look smug about it. To the right of these choices is 90Hz upscale. This works by using upscaling technology in an attempt to reduce the GPU load of your computer. I have yet to fully test this in all titles, but so far I've found this setting dulls the Crystal Light's excellent clarity by quite a bit, and distant objects can start to look a lot more jagged. Worth experimenting with if you are on a lower tier GPU, but for me the trade-off isn't worth it. On my 4070 Super, I'd rather drop to 72Hz if I'm having performance problems, crowded grid or something like that, and keep the clear distant views intact. But if you are looking for extra performance for your system, it's worth looking at this particular setting. Next is screen timeout. This just sets how long it is before your headset turns itself off. I have it set to the maximum of 5 minutes. Under that is brightness. I leave mine at 100, which is the default, but if blacks look washed out for you in darker titles like Elite Dangerous or Night Races in iRacing, you can dial this setting down to try and get some deeper contrast, although be aware doing so can cause some blooming issues on your display. Below this is the current IPD setting for your headset. See, mine's at 63.9. On the Crystal Light, this is adjusted manually with a dial inside the headset, but the software shows you the digital readout here so you can double check if you've got it right. Under this, you'll find controller settings. Hand vibration adjusts the strength of haptics. Calibration lets you realign them if tracking feels off. You'll also see under Others, there's 2 tick boxes. One simulates valve index layouts for compatibility, and the other enables controllerless mode, which I'm fairly sure isn't a real word, but ticking this will let you use the volume button on your Pimax headset to bring up the In VR Pimax menu, as shown here. In practice, once you set these preferences, you probably won't spend too much time in the device tab. But when tracking goes wonky, performance dips, or something just feels off, this should be your first point of call to improve your VR experience.
The VR is rad now.
Games tab. The Games tab in Pimax Play is where most of the real tuning happens. It's packed with sliders, checkboxes, and mysterious acronyms, enough to tempt any control geek into hours of tinkering. Used wisely, the options here can make your sim racing or flight sessions smoother and sharper. But push too far and you may end up with weird visuals, shimmering edges, or worse, spending more time in menus than actually racing. Let's break it down. At the very top, you can choose whether to apply settings globally or per game. I tend to use the common settings so everything shares the same configuration, but per game profiles are handy if you want iRacing at one resolution and Microsoft Flight Simulator at another, for example. The list here pulls from your Steam library, and non-Steam games won't appear automatically. To fix that, head back to the main Pimax Play screen and open the My Assets tab and use Import to point at the game's exe file that you want included in this library. The biggest decision in this tab is image quality, which controls rendering resolution. On the Crystal Light, low comes in at around 1440 by 1440 per eye. Medium is about 2016 by 2016 per eye. And high gives you the full native 2880 by 2880. Personally, I find medium is the sweet spot for my 4070 Super. It looks sharp while keeping performance smooth. In iRacing, it works brilliantly alongside the built-in fixed foveated rendering that comes with the MVP feature, while in heavier sims like Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, I sometimes drop this down to low so that my 4070 Super doesn't have a nervous breakdown. There's also an auto option all the way over here, but this tends to be overly cautious in my opinion, cutting quality more than necessary. So again, I would recommend manual control. Below that, you'll find GPU upscaling with options for AMD FSR and NVIDIA NIS. Don't worry, both of these work regardless of which actual GPU brand you are using. Each one offers quality, balanced, and performance settings. And there is a custom here as well that you can tweak for either one as well. Upscaling can really help if you're on a lower end hardware, but with a mid to high tier GPU like the 4070 Super or better, I'd skip the GPU scaling and adjust refresh rate or resolution instead. You might find that you get a better picture and a better performance by doing this. Under that, there is the sharpness setting. Now, you have to realize that you cannot combine GPU scaling with sharpness, so don't try and put these two together. It's one or the other, but not both together. In the sharpness slider, you can go all the way up to 1 if you want to, but you would probably tank your FPS by doing that. I've tried it at 0.2 and on most tracks it's fine in iRacing, but it does have a performance hit. So if you are struggling with any kind of FPS drops, probably best to leave this at 0. If you've got performance to spare, crank it up, see what happens. These three here, image quality, GPU scaling, and sharpness, are the backbone of how you're going to attain the best image quality from your Pimax headset. Once you find the sweet spot for your system and have a clear, stable picture without sacrificing too much performance, you shouldn't have to tweak them too much further, unless you find a really cool sim and that requires even more performance, in which case you might come back here and you might be tempted to use the per game settings. It's up to you, but these three are the ones that do the heavy lifting when it comes to image quality. That being said, some sims, being more equal than other sims, they can need a few tweaks to help you get the best from your system. So I'm going to return in future videos to give settings guides on the various sims that I have experience with. Look out for those. If you can't quite find the settings you like or need in these three, you can move on to some of the settings further down. This one here is probably going to help you out the most. Fixed foveated rendering. It works with quad views. Quad views won't actually turn on, by the way, until you click this little box here, and then you can start selecting stuff. So if you're trying to click on things and nothing's happening, don't forget to click here, and then you will have quad views. What are quad views? Well, quad views are developed by NVIDIA, and they divide each eye's image into two zones, a sharp central area and a lower resolution outer area. But you have two zones per eye. That's why it's called quad view. Programmers, you've got to love them, right? Dividing the resolution in this way helps save GPU power by only spending resources where you are actually looking. In many sims, it's a big win, but for some users, they have noticed seams where these two areas are divided, or they can see blur when moving their eyes rather than their head to view instrument panels or mirrors, for example. In iRacing, you will get better performance using iRacing's native fixed foveated rendering instead of Pimax's. So don't use this. If you've got iRacing, use the MVP feature inside iRacing instead. Right below this is central priority rendering, which is basically quad view turned up to 11. The dead center of your vision will be razor sharp with this setting, but the outside areas drop in detail even more aggressively. On paper, that sounds perfect because it will really boost performance, but in reality, it can be a bit off-putting. It's like your vision is artificially spotlighted in the center. I can't deal with it, but if you need the performance and it works for you, give it a try. Then there's Smart Smoothing. Pimax take on motion reprojection. When your GPU can't quite hold the frame rate, Smart Smoothing generates synthetic frames to kind of smooth the differences between them. When it works, it is surprisingly good. When it doesn't, it looks bloody awful, and you may feel the dreaded VR nausea while using this particular feature. For racing, I tend to avoid it, but for slower paced sims like Microsoft Flight Simulator, it could help. When using quad views or smart smoothing, you should see indicated here if you're using them or not. That doesn't always work, so please check up here rather than taking this area's word for it. Next is a personal favourite of mine, lock to half frame rate. This, unsurprisingly, locks your frame rate to half of whatever the refresh rate is. So if you're running at 90 Hz, the headset will lock at 45 FPS, which can often feel smoother than a choppy 90. Just make sure your system can actually attain at least 45 FPS, otherwise you're going to be back to the starters. And obviously this is not really going to work with racing simulators. But again, flight simulators, yeah, sure, why not? Try it. Next is Hidden Area Mask. In theory, this one is simple. It tells the GPU not to render pixels around the edges of the lens. You should then get some free performance from this setting. However, my tests indicate that for some reason, this actually uses more performance in the sim, not less. No idea why, but for the moment, I would suggest leaving this setting off. Vive compatibility is a niche option meant for older titles built specifically for the HTC Vive. Most modern games won't need this, but if you have an older VR title and it refuses to launch, flipping this on can fix some things. Finally, there are color options. These let you tweak brightness, contrast, and even color balance per eye. Honestly, even a settings obsessive like me will leave them at default. But if you feel one eye looks warmer, cooler, or darker than the other, this is where you can fix it. And that is the Games tab. One of the most powerful, but also one of the easiest to get lost in. My advice, start simple, as less tinkering means more time racing, flying, or even movie watching. And just to be clear, if you catch me using recline mode, I'm definitely watching Star Trek.
He did porn.
The General tab. The General tab is where you'll find the option to set the default runtime. This is essential if you use more than one VR headset and swap between them, as I do. If Pimax Open XR is not selected here as your default Open XR runtime, you should just click here. There'll be a little button for you to click and it will select Pimax Open XR as your Open XR default runtime. If you don't do that when you launch a VR title like iRacing, you might see it open on your monitor as a 2D game, but it won't open inside your headset. If you run into this issue, this is the tab to check, and this is the place where you need to click. For me, this happens a lot because I switch headsets for testing. If you only have a single headset, you should only need to do this the once. Below this is the audio setting, where you can set the Pimax headset as the default playback and recording device. This saves you some time from having to dive into the Windows sound settings every time you switch on VR. If you prefer to use external speakers or a dedicated microphone, you might want to leave this off, but for most users, it's handy to set this once and then forget about it. And finally, for this tab, there is the home setting, which decides whether you see the moonscape environment when you put on your headset or not. You can either have it on by default or you can turn it off. Why it's labeled off and default instead of the more obvious off and on, I don't know. But at least you now know what it does. Below that are details on how to contact technical support, some links to troubleshooting, and even how to export the log from your headset to support so they can try and diagnose some of the more serious problems that you might be having.
Knowledge is power.
The Advanced tab. Finally, we come to the Advanced tab. Despite its name, it's really no more complicated than any of the other tabs, but it does give you some extra tools for some fine tuning. First up is IPD offset. This lets you digitally shift the image position for each display. Since the Crystal Light doesn't have any mechanical lens adjustments, this isn't physically moving anything. Instead, it just alters the way the image is rendered. Some users report sharper visuals by tweaking these offsets, especially if the sweet spot feels slightly off for them. I haven't needed to use this feature, but if your image seems a little blurry, it might be worth experimenting with these settings. You can always hit the default keys if you get into trouble. I personally feel that a good prescription lens insert will probably make a bigger difference than any fiddling you can do here. Next is local dimming. This improves contrast and black levels by dividing the backlight into zones that can brighten or dim independently. With local dimming off, blacks can look a little more dark grey. With it on, dark areas of the image stay deep and inky black. The slider controls how aggressively the dimming is applied, with higher values equaling stronger dimming, while lower values can help reduce blooming, which is when bright areas spill light into darker areas. I usually keep mine on high for the deepest blacks, but some might prefer dialing it back to reduce possible artifacts that they are seeing. Below is pass-through. This is enabled by default and lets you double tap the headset to see the outside world. It's handy, sort of, but don't expect this sort of high quality pass-through you might have experienced with the Quest 3. You can also assign a perspective hotkey that triggers pass-through. Useful if you'd rather trigger it from your keyboard wheel or joystick rather than use a double tap. Why is it called perspective hotkey and not pass-through hotkey? Don't know. Between these two options is Activate Chaperone, which turns the warning system on to show you if you're about to walk into a wall while you're in VR. If you only use VR for seated experience, you could switch this off, but it doesn't have any negative impact on anything you might be doing while seated, so probably best to leave it on so you don't forget to switch it back on when you're doing a standing VR experience. Finally, there's motion compensation right here at the very bottom. I've got none in here because I don't have any motion rigs attached to my system. So obviously this is a feature designed for people with motion rigs. If you have a motion compensation sensor connected to that rig, it should show in this drop down, and it will allow the software to account for your rig's movement so the world doesn't shake along with you or move out of sync. As I just mentioned, I don't own a motion platform, so I can't test this for myself, but if Next Level Racing should happen to be watching this video and fancy sending me a motion rig, I will be happy to review it. And that's the Advanced tab. Most people won't need to change much here, but if you're chasing that last bit of image clarity or immersion, or you have specific vision requirements, these are the tools to experiment with.
How's your little experiment going?
Conclusions. So that's Pimax Play in a nutshell. It's not the slickest piece of software you'll ever use, but once you get used to it and know where things live, it does give you the tools to help you get the best from your Pimax headset. For me, the real win comes from setting sensible refresh rates, choosing a balanced resolution like medium, and then leaving the more exotic options like smart smoothing or central priority rendering on the shelf, unless I really do need them. That way, I spend more time actually racing and flying instead of tinkering endlessly in menus. The truth is, there's no single magic setting that works for everyone. Your PC, your games, and even your own eyes will all play a part in what feels right for you. But if you start simple, test one change at a time, and don't be afraid to experiment. The default key is there if you get into trouble. You'll soon find something that works for you. At the end of the day, that's the point to all of this, to get the settings out of the way so you can focus on the joy of driving, flying, or exploring inside the wonderful world of VR. Because let's be honest, none of us bought a Pimax headset just to stare at the Pimax Play screen. With that said, I'm going racing. So I hope you found this video helpful. And until the next one, drive safe and I will see you on track. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click the like button. And if you haven't already done so, subscribe. Click the little bell icon if you want to be notified of any future videos.